Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Sue Sheehy with Dun & Bradstreet, and I'll be moderating the session today. We certainly appreciate the time that you've set aside to join our discussion on global risk management. I'm also going to be joined today by Frank Cirillo with Dun & Bradstreet and Jack Scarpelli and Seb Lazar from Xerox. So we've put together what we hope you'll find is a very exciting and informative agenda. We're going to provide you with some insight into some tried and true best practices, and more importantly, some practical applications when thinking about bringing together disparate global data, which is unstructured and often messy, and turning that into a confident, automated decision process. If you think about Xerox and D&B, we're a natural fit when it comes to this topic. We're both industry leaders in our space, and we've thrived through innovation, continuing to push new products and solutions to serve the marketplace. And we have offices, employees, customers, suppliers, and partners in well over 160 countries. So standardizing and centralizing data, conducting analytics, and turning that into a sound decision-making process has been an instrumental part of our success plan. And we're certainly happy to be sharing some of the points and lessons learned along the way. It's a journey, and a challenging journey at that, which you'll hear about in the next 30 minutes. First, Frank's going to highlight some of the challenges in the marketplace that we're hearing about as it comes to global risk management, and how D&B has taken some steps to address those challenges. First, by organizing credit and financial information at the business level into a centralized global data repository, and then creating archives over time which enable the development of predictive modeling. He's also going to talk about an offshoot of that effort, which is the creation of the first ever standardized score that's globally consistent and predicts the health and viability at the business level. Second, you're going to hear from Jack and Seb. They're going to share their experiences regarding Xerox's need to standardize and push automation to a new level. They're going to talk about the challenges they faced and how they partnered with D&B to overcome those challenges and put their strategy into action. Finally, towards the end, we're going to leave about 10 minutes for open Q&A, and we certainly encourage you to submit questions using the Ask the Question feature on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll be covering as many of those questions as possible, and then we'll also be following up with a copy of this presentation via email, and you can certainly engage in deeper conversations with the presenters if need be after the session. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Frank.
Thank you, Sue, and good morning, everyone. As Sue had mentioned, today's session really is going to focus on global risk management best practices. Specifically, we're going to look at globally consistent risk management processes, the barriers that our customers are facing, and steps that can be taken to mitigate some of those barriers. So let's jump to the next slide here. Okay. In today's global marketplace, our customers are facing a number of factors that make it quite difficult for them to act upon establishing an effective global risk management process. What our customers are telling us, some of the challenges that they are facing, bringing together their disparate and unstructured data into a common and consistent format, as well as archiving this data in a consistent format to enable future predictive analytics down the road. Establishing a uniform data collection and decision rules process across all countries. When countries establish their own data collection and decisioning rules process, the task is, in terms of transitioning them to a set of consistent and credible standards, is often a difficult one and typically met with some challenges. And the third really is around people underestimating the complexity of bringing in their internal and external data and their decision systems. Adopting a phased-in approach while continuing to manage the business as usual. It's complex. You need to be patient. You need to engage key stakeholders from the business side, technology, analytics, and probably a host of other departments that I'm not mentioning here. And I do believe Xerox will share some of those challenges when we get to their slides. To address these challenges, the D&B data and analytic approach is really focused on 5 key areas. And it centers around the global core capability improvements, improving our completeness of data around small businesses, improving our predictive components, our scores, leveraging data to make our scores that much more predictive, improvements in our global score capabilities, what we are doing today in the U.S. and leveraging those best practices so that we can bring to market a score or other analytic capabilities that are truly global. And finally, we're all, we're leading with our standards scores, but at some point to identify and improve upon the capabilities of any type of customer engagement where we're leveraging both the D&B information and customer-specific data. Now, you can't execute your global analytic plan until you get the data right. In early 2012, some 5 years ago, we designed our global strategy so that the D&B data and content team walked hand in hand with our analytics team. And we continue to focus on those efforts and investments today, 5 years later. For the first 2 areas here, we understand the importance to have complete core and firmographic data. That is at the core of what we are. That is the foundation. We need to be able to tie our customer information to our D&B data. And improvements on our firmographic data and our core data will allow us to match our customers' input files, our input data, to the right global business, and making sure that we have as close to 100% of the small business covered as possible. It's also essential that we accomplish this across all countries. We've done, obviously, a very good job in achieving high metrics here in North America, especially in the U.S., but we need to do this globally. And we need to enable us to leverage additional data sources so that we can bring to market more predictive insight, leveraging sources such as trade, procedure database, statement data, our business activity that we garner from our import-export database, shipping and delivery data, D&B inquiries, and other sources of data. For this, we have to prioritize the markets, and we typically apply an 80-20 rule. That is, we target the 20%, that 20% of the countries that cover 80% or more of the gross national product. By late 2016, we made a significant progress and were able to launch the first ever globally consistent standard risk score with nearly 100% of coverage. And we call that score the Global Business Ranking, and we'll touch on that in a minute. You'll also hear later from both Jack and Seb to offer up their feedback on a very exciting collaborative project that we worked on in terms of development of scorecards in many, many markets in Europe and North America, where we leveraged our archive data in these markets. Okay. What is the global archive data? Well, it's at the core of what we need to do in order to develop any analytics solution, whether it's a custom scorecard, whether we're talking about our standard off-the-shelf scores, such as failure and delinquency, viability, or in this case, the Global Business Ranking, GBR. The Global Archive is a central repository which collects and archives key risk data elements that is typically used for model development and other analytic solutions. Generally speaking, our archives go back 3 to 5 years, depending on the market. Let's get a little bit more specific with the types of data we have prioritized for global collection. The Global Archive repository contains around 240 global archive data elements across these 10 categories you see on the right. Generally speaking, these 10 categories roll up into 4 major segments, as we like to call it, of data that's collected and compiled. And these segments really are firmographic data, financial statement data, public record or derogatory data, and accounts receivable. Again, we refer to that as trade. I'm sure we all agree that having immediate access to these 10 categories of data using consistent terminology and definition makes global risk management seem more like reality than just a vision. Personally, I know that this was a key factor in our collaboration with Xerox to develop up to 16 country-specific scorecards in both Europe and North America. D&B has a global archive data. It focused on 25 countries today. As I mentioned earlier, the 80-20 rule applies here. These are the 24 priority markets where data is collected and archived today. Our plan is to add 8 additional markets within the 12 months. Since the rollout of our global strategy in 2012, our best approach to securing global archive has been really through a coordinated effort between both our D&B owned markets and partner markets. Prior to 2012, not unlike probably what our customers experience today, for the most part, the markets worked independent of each other. So data that was collected, stored, archived varied in some cases dramatically by market. This global archive strategy has enabled us, again, to leverage this point-in-time data so that we can introduce a truly global score to the marketplace, and that's GBR. Again, point-in-time data, looking back and assessing what a customer's portfolio looked like at a point in time, typically our observation period, allowed us now to see how those businesses performed over a period of time. The level of consistency that we have with the data in these 25 markets now have greatly improved our ability to conduct this level of analysis in a consistent manner, simply because now the data is consistent across these markets. In many countries, we are deriving new insights from new sources to develop new capabilities. So what I've shared with you so far really falls into the realm of the D&B traditional data sources. Now, we would be remiss if we did not recognize the fact that in some countries, gaining access to traditional data sources of data, like trade, financial data, and public record filings, it's nearly impossible. And we surely had some issues collaborating with Xerox to secure some of this information. But it's nearly impossible due to regulations and the reporting requirements, quite frankly. So how do we predict delinquency or default or going out of business in the absence of this traditional a set of data points that we use in our risk model development? The solution really is all about leveraging advances in technology, data aggregation, and apply really a heavy dose of innovation. I'll just speak to a couple of these data sources that we're leveraging today. For example, intelligence change management. This provides us insight into the frequency, velocity, and types of changes occurring in our customers' portfolio, characterized by just various operational business activities. Much of this is firmographic information, hundreds and hundreds of data points that speak to changes in employee size, for example, in sales, linkage, global footprint, location, change in management, et cetera, et cetera. So we're monitoring that on an ongoing basis, and we're leveraging this data source in our development effort for our standard scores. Another is cross-border inquiries, significant in identifying behaviors across multiple regions and predict business viability. It provides us with behavioral insight into which prospects and customers may be expanding globally and or are in a growth mode. therefore giving our customers the insight they need to understand what the business trajectory is of that potential customer. Is it growth? Is it decay? Are they stable, et cetera, et cetera. Next few slides, we'll talk a little bit about the Global Business Ranking, also referred to as GBR. GBR is a multidimensional relative risk ranking tool. So if you think about our scores today, our failure and delinquency score, it's predicting a bad event over the next 12 months. GBR is no different, where it's predicting something very severe, very similar to our failure bad definition. I would say that the definition, GBR casts an even greater net in terms of identifying those companies that are going bad over the next 12 months, in addition to just the default definition that we've used for failure in the past. The score is a multidimensional score, and what does that mean? So you have a 1 to 15 risk rating, 1 being the lowest risk, 15 being the highest risk. But in addition to the predictive component of the overall rating, you'll also receive a descriptive component, what we call a data depth indicator. And the data depth indicator will indicate or provide our customer with that level of transparency now that they will know how much information, how much data was utilized to score that business. And with GBR, we will score every commercially active business based on the data that's available to us. So obviously in many markets, certainly in North America and in Europe and parts of Asia and a couple of markets in Latin America, data is quite robust, so we expect the score to be predicated on rich, deep D&B information. But in other markets, the data might be something less than robust. And we will still score that business based on that information that's available to us, whether it's limited or robust. You will still receive a score. And the feedback that we've gotten from our customers over the past 12 to 18 months has been, while we expect D&B to have a score predicated on deep, rich information in many of the likely markets, again, Europe, North America, et cetera, where we really see the value add is you're providing us now you're enabling us to score, set up an auto decisioning process in markets today where it is very much a manual process for us. It's costly, and enabling us to set up an auto decisioning process in these markets is huge. So it's been well received by many of our global customers. The score is a consistent score. So a 1 to 15 scale, as I mentioned a minute ago, a score of 10 in the U.S. would mean the same thing as a 10 anywhere else in the world. That's quite a bit different than our failure and or delinquency scores that are very much market-driven, market-specific. And from a coverage perspective, we're scoring quite a bit. We expect to score close to 100% of these businesses, as I said earlier. As long as we have a valid DUNS number and they're commercially active, they will receive a score. On this slide, you will see that the level of information or data that's being leveraged to score these businesses. And in a perfect world, we would love to have local country data feed into all of these scores. But reality is, as we venture into the emerging markets, data becomes quite a bit more difficult to secure, and as a result, the score will be predicated on data that's something less than robust, where we're bringing in firmographic signal data, inquiry data. How many times was that business inquired upon? And macro level information. So we're still leveraging quite a bit of data, but again, as we venture into the markets that are providing us that local country view, the data that we're leveraging becomes even that much more predictive. We're bringing in financial statement information, AR, trade information, as well as public record and derogatory information. Okay, and whether it's a we're talking about GBR or one of our local failure or delinquency scores. In any score development effort, we will leverage multiple data sources, such as you see here. Whether it's our linkage to understand the overall exposure from a family corporate structure perspective, bringing in very important demographic information such as size and age of business, et cetera, bringing in our trade information. Again, we have a voluntary trade program established in 40-plus markets across the globe where our customers participate. They provide us with their customers' trade information. We certainly protect the anonymity of their customers. We're interested in the overall payment behavior, and we leverage that information in our scores. Principal and public record information is leveraged. Of course, financial information is incredibly predictive, and we leverage it where available. Of course, the rules that govern this will change market to market, but we're leveraging financials as well as macroeconomic information. Okay, why does this matter? What's the payoff? In a minute, as I said, you're going to hear from Jack and Seb at Xerox, but I'd first like to share with you a case study to give you a sense of what's possible and the significant payoff that can be recognized by executing on a global risk management strategy. This is a client in the small business software space with customers across 15 countries. Their goal was to implement an auto decisioning system that is consistent across all markets, and that will enable them to auto decision on their new applicants, potential new applicants, and assign credit limits. As you can see here, the left-hand side is a distribution of accounts, and the right-hand side is a distribution of the AR dollars. As you can see, the U.S. Is pretty dominant here with approximately 47% of the accounts, but that also have 77% of the exposure. When we add GBR to the mix, you'll notice here the second column shows the global scorecard that our customer has in production today over the last few years, as a matter of fact. And as any diligent credit officer would do, they built rules around this scorecard. If an account had less than 60% of the variables you see here listed in column 1, if they were unavailable 60% or more of the time, no score was produced, and it went to manual review. Again, time-consuming and certainly a costly process. The last 3 columns shows the new segmented approach to setting up the scorecard and introducing GBR as an attribute or predictor in their models. Now, the exciting part here is really what you see on the right side of this slide. The client's score coverage, again, which was at about 47% using their current set of business rules, increased to almost 98%. And the bad capture rate went from almost 25% to almost 36%. Again, we score these businesses. We are saying at that 20% threshold, the worst 20% of the population, you are now able to capture almost 36% of the bads over the next 12 months. So in both cases, significant improvements above and beyond what this particular customer was using with their own internal scorecard. So at this point, I think I'd like to pass it over to Jack and Seb at Xerox.
Okay, Frank, thank you, and good morning, everyone. Just to, hopefully I got this right, okay. Just to build on what Frank's comments, Xerox, a global organization that provides financing to our end users, customers for all of our office and production products. Our portfolio is quite large and very diverse, and we touch multiple markets and customers within the U.S. As well as in Europe and in Canada. However, we did have some challenges in providing a consistent view and risk rating of our customers, which is the primary reason we partnered with D&B to ensure that we were able to provide a consistent view. We did have a very fragmented process per region that was causing us challenges within our portfolio, as common customers would maintain different risk ratings, and our small ticket scorecard evaluations were inconsistent in determining the probability of default, which ultimately led to different risk ratings as well. The inconsistencies that also led to different provisioning rates, which ultimately affected some of our profitability. And as a publicly traded company, we provide an assessment of the credit quality of our portfolio in our financial statement reporting, and wanted to ensure that our reporting was as accurate and consistent as possible. So in order to achieve this goal, we standardized our global risk function by developing a common, consistent adjudication process and policy per region, and started this process by creating a new generation global scorecard with D&B to ensure we had a consistent review platform and probability of default for each customer per region up to a $250,000 limit. Efficiency is important to us as our average ticket size is $20,000, so we want the scorecard to perform much of the work as possible and allow our underwriters to focus on the larger, more complicated account reviews. Building the new generation scorecard obviously came with its share of challenges, and data integrity was the largest obstacle, specifically in Europe and Canada, where the quality and historical storage of our data was limiting at best. It took quite a bit of time to find the data and scrub it to ensure we had clean data as possible, and that's important. It was important to us, and certainly within working with D&B to ensure that we were developing the scorecards and generating the output that we were looking for. We also had some regulatory challenges in sharing the data, specifically in Europe, but we were able to get our attorneys involved and overcome them as well. So we started our project in Q4 of 2015, and have moved forward. Obviously we have quite a bit of information in the U.S. and some limiting information in Canada and Europe, but we had to develop the scorecards using different data providers and scoring scales, and we were able to accomplish that. Our audit decision rate, as Frank mentioned, quite important to us. We are based on efficiency. We need to achieve a 75% or better audit adjudication process. We have that in the U.S., but did not have that in Canada and outside of the U.S., and that has been a goal to achieve, but also we wanted to achieve that goal while minimizing our losses, right? So we didn't want to just approve all the transactions. We wanted to make sure that the system was doing the majority of work, allowing us to have our underwriters focus on some of the larger, more complicated transactions. The internal data, again, maintained at the local markets, but were different, had different varying rules and processes. So our approach, again, was to look at it from a global perspective, ensuring that if we had common customers, we had a common process, a common platform, a common scorecard, to ensure that our consistency was consistent, or our output was consistent from a global perspective, which allowed more efficiency and better profitability for the organization. I will turn it over to Seb, and Seb will get more into detail regarding the specifics and the best practices that we were able to develop.
Thank you, Jack. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. So I want to give you a bit more details on the journey we are going through. As Jack mentioned, the project started in 2015, towards the end of 2015, and we are now close to completion. We expect to complete the project by the end of this year. And actually, I joined Xerox in March of this year, and when I joined, the Canadian project was already well advanced. And the situation in Europe was a bit more challenging, I would say. In Europe, we operate in 16 countries. We work with 7 different credit bureaus. We have a very fragmented IT landscape. And I think at the beginning of the project, we were probably a bit too ambitious in terms of which data we could leverage for this project. And a lot of data had been shared with D&B. And it was difficult to make sense out of this data. So in April this year, we took a step back for the European region, and we reframed a little bit the project and started almost from scratch. We extracted new data sets, but much more focused with less fields, less records. So much more parsimonious approach from a data perspective, leveraging the expertise both from the D&B side and from the Xerox side to make sure that we had the right elements in our data sets to build those new models. And it took approximately 3 months to get the first country completed, which was the UK. And considering that the project, we had 6 months left to complete the project, we had spent 3 months on the UK. I think at this point in time, some people started to get a bit nervous about the overall project, because if you think about it, completing 14 or 15 countries in a 6 months time when we had spent three months on the first country, that was a bit worrying. But what happened is, with the UK, we built a repeatable framework with the D&B team, and actually the rollout with the other countries was very fast. So we moved from a 3 month timeline to less than 2 week timeline for the other countries. So the D&B team working with us managed to deliver 10 countries in 4 months time, and we are now 1 month away from the end of the project, and we are in good shape to complete the project on time. So I think that's a pretty successful story here. And we are working in parallel with the US, and the project already starts to pay for Xerox, because we went live with the UK 1 month ago. We went live with Canada just yesterday, and so the next countries will come very soon. I think my 2 takeaways from our experience with D&B on this project is, one, it's not all about data. Expert judgment is a key to success, and even more so when your data infrastructure is not at a fully mature stage, which was the case. And as we move forward with this project, we are ramping up our data infrastructure. And the second takeaway is, it's important to step back and pivot if needed in those kind of projects, because at some point you need to get the critical things done, and you can have very ambitious goals at the beginning, but as you move forward and you start to get into the details of the data and limitations, you need to figure out what is possible, reasonable within the agreed time frame, and be focused on the critical things for success. So that's I think the journey we went through with D&B. It's not the end, but we are close to the end. And of course, this project is not the end of the journey, so it's more like a milestone, and we are building a foundation for the future. We have other projects for 2018 and beyond. And maybe my last word is just to publicly recognize Frank and the D&B team working with us, because they are providing great support, very focused on understanding our needs and meeting our requirements. So thank you all for the great job and your support with Xerox. Sue, I'm handing over to you for the conclusion.
All right. Thank you so much, Seb and Jack. Very interesting and insightful. We appreciate your sharing. We do have about 10 minutes left. And as I mentioned at the beginning, if you want to ask a question of either the D&B side or the Xerox side, there's an ask. There's questions from the audience functionality on the right-hand side of your screen. so you can submit those questions online. And we do have a couple that we've already gotten and we'll get into here in a second. But before we do that, I just wanted to take a liberty of summarizing, I think, what I heard as the key takeaways and some of the lessons learned that you guys can noodle on as you're thinking about your own global strategy. First of all, getting your own internal data in order is important, but it certainly isn't a showstopper. And there's ways to make progress concurrently as you're working on cleansing, matching, and standardizing your own internal disparate data. Second of all, there's options. So you can explore different avenues of scoring, whether that is through a standard score like GBR that Frank went over, or using your own internal data to build some judgmental expert scorecards, or perhaps moving to a custom statistically developed scorecard like you heard from Xerox. So you have options to concurrently engage in global scoring while you're working on organizing your own internal data. And then I think the last key takeaway is really scoping out both a short-term and a long-term plan. There's baby steps that you can take along the way. You don't have to wait for all the stars to line up before you can actually start executing on your strategy. And it's imperative and important to enroll your key stakeholders for support. So I think, for me, those were the three big takeaways in summary. And then also, the payoff is significant. If you can design the strategy and execute on the strategy, there's really no guesswork here, that in these 5 areas you're going to see significant improvement. Number one, in the improvement in coverage, your ability to score the lion's share of your portfolio, the lion's share of your new applications. It's a significant efficiency gain. Second of all, the added precision of going through the process. As you organize your data, bring in other third-party data sources, and add incremental layers of predictive data into the scorecard, you're going to see a boost in the accuracy of the prediction. And of course, that's all going to lead to improved cash flows and accelerated sales. So, from a KPI perspective, these are the things that you can anchor on as you're thinking about, will there be a payoff? So now I'd like to open up to Q&A. The first question that we had come in was for the Xerox side. So either Jack or Seb, how do you ensure that the predictive performance of your models are adequate according to your requirements?
That's a good question. Thanks, Sue. I will take this one. With this project, we have an increased reliance on models, and effectively it's important to mitigate model risk, which is the risk of loss resulting from using insufficiently accurate models to make decisions. So we look at the different stages of the model lifecycle. The development stage, which is taking place with D&B. So there's some risk here, in terms of using incomplete or inaccurate data. If there's flaws in the model estimation methodology or wrong specifications, those kind of things. So we have a first independent validation, I would say, on our side of the models to make sure that the models are conceptually sound, that they meet our expectations. And we have a validation point with our project steering committee. The second stage is the implementation stage. So we go through a lot of testing, user acceptance testing, and we also have a validation point with our steering committee to review the results and ensure that they are in line with the first development step results and with our expectations. And the last step is when we go live with the models, we put in place an ongoing monitoring of the models. We track the performance, we track the robustness of the models, aiming stability, and make sure that they still perform at an adequate level. So with that kind of project, you need to ramp up the governance that goes with more automation and more reliance on models. And that's what we are putting in place here at Xerox. And of course, it has to be commensurate with the size and complexity of the organization. But a very critical thing to do as we move towards more automation.
Okay, thank you. One other one for Xerox that came in, Jack, this might be directed to you. Are there certain key benefits that Xerox has recognized by increasing their auto decision rates?
Certainly. So the increase in the auto decision rate allows the organization as a whole to be much more efficient. So in this market space, efficiency and response time is critical. So the auto adjudication, the auto decisioning, the higher that number is, the quicker we have an opportunity to win additional business in the competitive market that we operate in. So it's important that for us, and we have seen that response time already improve, and that's going to allow for sales to grow. And then in addition to that, it allows us to be consistent in our decisioning and in the responses and the risk ratings that we have on the back end as well. So this way we are consistent from a provisioning standpoint, and it allows us to be better with our provisioning as well. So there's profitability improvements consistent with that in that general. So again, there is definitely improvements or benefits for the adjudication to be as high as it can be. And as Seb mentioned earlier, we do monitor, we go through the loss curves, we generate the vintage loss curves, so we track and monitor the portfolio and the quality of portfolios to ensure that the adjudication process is working and that we're minimizing our losses as much as we can.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I think we have time for one more, and Frank, this is directed at you. It sounds like this customer is already using the local market failure score. How would they use GBR in replace of that or in addition to that?
Yeah, we actually have multiple scenarios where our customers are leveraging GBR. In this particular case, customers that are comfortable, have been using our failure score for years, they are bound by that country-specific business rules that won't allow for every commercially active business to be scored. So as a result, there will be businesses that will not receive a failure score that is commercially active. A valid DUNS number is there. As a result, they look at GBR as a way of closing that gap. So failure score, which again is a score that they're very comfortable with, is getting them 80% there. That additional 20% gap can be filled with GBR. We also have customers that are all in on GBR through a number of validations. They see the value from a performance perspective, and they feel that implementing this consistent scale across all markets, above all else, is paramount. And as a result, leading with GBR across all markets is something that's much more desirable to that particular set of customers.
Okay, great. Thank you, Frank, and thank you, Jeff and Seb, for answering those questions. It looks like our time is about up. I wanted to certainly extend the offer to get further in touch with either Frank, Jeff, or Seb if you want to have additional dialogue about your strategy, where you're at along the phase of moving to a global risk management process, and pick their brains even further if you desire. So, like I said, we'll send out this presentation. Their contact information is on the last slide. And again, thank you so much for your time and attention today. We hope that you got some tidbits and found the session valuable. Have a great rest of the day.